All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Well, the Cleveland Cavaliers have been the biggest surprise of this NBA season so far, continuing their undefeated streak with a win in Chicago. A very fascinating game. Found themselves down in the third quarter, but an all-bench run without a center with a zone look brings them back into the game, and then the starters come in and finish off the Bulls and keep the undefeated streak alive. I can think of nobody better to do a deep dive on the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'll admit, I'm just a little bit of a skeptic still, and I need Carter to help me understand this team on a deeper level, help you guys understand this team on a deeper level, and explain to us how they are kicking everybody's ass. First of all, Carter, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Obviously, this is. I was just, telling your producer right before we started that we have officially hit the part of the Cavs season where my normie, non-basketball obsessive friends are starting to text me and like, "Dude, you seeing this?" Like, it's been, obviously, only 8 teams in NBA history have started 12-0. They have a very, very good chance with their upcoming schedule with a couple rest advantage games. Their only rest advantage games of the first half of the season are happening this week to maybe extend that up to 13, 14, 15, going into a matchup in Boston that will be on national TV. So, man, it's the good times have been rolling. That's for damn sure.
How is it, like cautious optimism or is it like reckless optimism?
It's full bore, just celebration and fun. I think, these last two, I think it's actually moving into, I think even maybe for the team, into like the weight of the streak definitely is starting to get real. And like now, you start 7-0 and you're like maybe a little up against it in your 8th game. You go, whatever, but now it's like, we got to beat the Nets, man. It's actually, I feel like flipping almost more to stress. Darius Garland drops an F-bomb post game. Like, man, that was a big effing win against the Nets, because it's like I think the guys don't want to lose the streak either. They're having so much fun. So I think it's actually gone from like cautious fun to unbridled celebration to like almost moving towards angst because you just want to keep it going. But no, it's been, I mean, talk about a 10 out of 10 start to the year.
I the one time I personally rooted for a team that was on a long win streak was the 2013 Miami Heat. And it's funny, I literally was thinking about that this morning when I was watching the game, where it's like you find out pretty quickly when you're on that kind of winning streak that like everyone's a little feisty. And you're getting everyone's best bet because they want to be their best shot because they're the team that wants to knock you off. And like the NBA right now is in just even a more substantial, tougher place than it was back in 2013. Like, here's the thing, like even in the Eastern Conference, the middle tier, the bottom tier of the East is certainly not as strong as the West, but there are still feisty teams in there. Chicago's feisty. Brooklyn is feisty. Brooklyn has got a lot of athleticism. They got a lot of guys that can create their own shots. And so it's like even on a night in and night out basis, it's just tougher. And like you could feel that pressure last night. But one of the things that I think has stood out to me the most about this team, and I noticed it last night when you just saw the energy that was coming off of the bench when Ty Jerome and Georges Niang and Dean Wade and Karis LeVert and was it Merrill was the fifth and that lineup that went on that run. There's an energy. There's this thing that happens when a team really starts to rack up wins where you can tell they get addicted to the feeling. And then it almost permeates throughout the whole roster with this like unbelievable commitment to winning basketball because everyone's addicted to it. And like that is when you really start to get into that special territory. So like, here's the thing. I think the biggest story of this team, obviously there's so much more going on. There's a lot of different guys that are playing better than they did last year. There's a lot of like different dynamics at play. But to me, the story of this team is Kenny Atkinson optimizing the roster and getting another level of buy-in down the roster in terms of just the attention to detail on a possession-by-possession basis. So tell us about what the experience has been going from JB Bickerstaff to Kenny Atkinson.
Well, I got a chance to have like a 20, 30-minute sit down with Kenny Atkinson at the start of the season, one-on-one, right, at the end of camp. And, I was just so impressed by the guy. He was really, you could tell that he had the right attitude. In all of his kind of preseason availabilities, The guy spent so much time talking about all the stuff he learned from Steve Kerr, from Ty Lue, and working on those staffs. And like, I even said to him, I was like, Kenny, like you're not like a new coach. Like normally when a coach is kind of moving into a new job, gets a head coaching gig and they're talking about all their influences, all the people they've, been stealing ideas and learning from. It's normally like the kind of the wunderkind, the new kid on the block coming in. Like, dude, you've been in the league like 20 plus years at this point. Like, what about like, this kind of learning mentality has like, why is that taking root? And like, he just clearly has kind of, he got fired in Brooklyn, obviously a traumatic experience. He even said like, it was like, I had like a bit of a why me?
Yeah, it was unfair.
Why am I getting, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would certainly argue it was unfair. But instead of going into full victim mentality, he's like, "What do I need to get better at as a coach and as a manager of personalities?" And going to Ty Lue and Steve Kerr, like I cannot imagine two more different coaches on that spectrum, but two elite coaches in that very specific capacity. And like it just kind of feels like he came back a better coach than he was in Brooklyn. And I already thought he was a pretty darn good coach in Brooklyn, and in terms of the ways he's impacting the team on the floor, they're running, man. They are second in transition points per possession and seventh in transition frequency. This is a team that we have been begging to kind of speed up over the last couple years, playing these two bigs. This was a team that over the past couple years have really let perfect be the enemy of good offensively. A lot of possessions where it's just swing, and then they get a pretty good advantage, and then they drive and kick again, and all of a sudden there's 3 seconds left on the shot clock. And every now and again you'll still see that slip through. But this is just a much more decisive offense. Like, yeah, they're running in transition, but they're also just getting shots up faster in the half court. They're getting they are, a lot more possessions where the shot's going up at 13 or 14 because they just took the first pretty good shot that was available to them. A stat that I would have thought was maybe a negative indicator about how the offense was going that I actually have completely flipped on is, I don't know if you know this, Jason, they're 29th in passes per game right now. This is a team that, and when you think about a team going on this offensive explosion where they're second in the league in offensive rating going into that Chicago game last night per cleaning the glass, you'd be like, oh man, are they playing ISO ball? Is this Joe Johnson reincarnated? And it's not that. They are moving the ball, but they are just playing so much more decisively. They're playing with so much better tempo, and they're capitalizing on the mismatches that their pace is creating for them. Even though they're 29th in passes per game, they're 6th in points created by assist per game. So, there's passing just to pass, and then there's passing with decisiveness. And I really think that is the biggest change in terms of the tempo of how they've been playing. So
yeah, so let's zoom in on the transition piece for just a second, and I do want to talk about the half court piece because you're right. It is a decisiveness. It's a quick action at the beginning of a possession to get an initial advantage, and then it's like bang bang, get a shot up. Everyone's making because again, I always think this is funny when teams don't look to be aggressive on that initial advantage because it's like, what did you run the action for? You ran the action to get that advantage so that you can get a shot up. Like instead of to your point, letting perfect be the enemy of good, and then you end up with something worse at the end of the clock as you run into more of those issues. But the transition piece is interesting to me because you look at this roster, and it's like Darius Garland, speed guard, Donovan Mitchell, like literally S tier athlete. Evan Mobley's one of the most mobile bigs in the league. Jarrett Allen is a lot bigger than he was when he was in Brooklyn, but he is still a very mobile big. You've got a lot of speed, and you have this defensive personnel that was certainly capable of getting the stops that you needed to get out and run. Was JB Bickerstaff just not emphasizing it enough? Do you think it comes down to them forcing more turnovers as Kenny Atkinson has leaned more into switching? Do you think it's just been a point of emphasis like, hey, dudes, let's get up and down the floor? Like, what was it like under JB Bickerstaff where you felt like that was being a missed opportunity?
It's hard to say, man, because, this is where like not being in the actual room, it makes it so hard because all of the public facing information we had was that JB's coaching staff was asking them to run. He was asking them to get into their sets quicker. You'd see even anecdotally, you'd see them kind of walking the ball up after an inbound, and he'd be clapping on the sideline like, "Go, go, go!" Like, so who knows if it is the message, the messenger, the personnel, or how they were emphasizing it. That was the change. I asked Kenny in my one-on-one. I'm like, hey, everyone talks about getting the pace up. How do you actually do it? Like what, because that's like the staple of every offseason. And you see reporting that all through camp they were running with an 18-second shot clock, or at least during significant parts of their scrimmage, and so I don't know if the message is the same, or like Kenny just tweaked it in a way that the guys were able to hear it better, or if it was some of those things in practice where we were like, hey, you actually just don't get 24 seconds during this scrimmage. You only get 18. Those are the kind of things that I think it's a big alchemical reaction in the end that like led to whatever got them up the mountain. Like, do I think that it's definitely something Kenny values more than JB valued? Yes. But like, I do kind of feel the instinct to defend JB a little bit, who, by the way, I think Pistons are playing really good basketball right now. Because a lot of Cavs fans kind of have the instinct to go, see, all you had to do was ask him to run. I'm like, dude, he asked him. Like, he definitely was asking him to go a little faster and get into their sets. But I think it's bit of column A, bit of column B, and the outcome is they're running.
Well, you know how it goes. Sometimes like your wife says something to you and you don't actually listen, but then someone else says it to you and then you do. Sometimes you just need a different voice.
Sometimes it's just a different voice.
Sometimes you just
they've been hearing this. They've been hearing the same guy for 5 years, and a new guy comes in and says it 5% different. And I wouldn't be surprised if JB turned on Cavs tape and was like, come on.
I guarantee you he did.
Darius is finally shooting threes. Darius's 3-point rate is up 9% year over year. And literally after every game, JB would be like, Darius has got to shoot more threes. We're asking him to shoot more threes, and then all of a sudden he is. So I'm sure there's a little bit of that at play in the Bickerstaff household.
There's a difference between like to me, as someone who's rooted for the Lakers over the last few years, going from Frank Vogel to Darvin Ham was like, we just need a different voice. It's different than like Darvin Ham to JJ, where it's like, this guy's actually incompetent and we need to make a change. Like, that is a very different type of transition. Like, I literally just felt like the guys like were just done with Frank. Frank had been their coach for several years. They just needed to change. Like, I think that's kind of the way this can go. Sometimes you just need a different voice in there to make it feel reinvigorated, to make it feel different. And I mean, the pace has been something that has transitioned into the half court as well. And like, to me, Georges Niang is the classic example of this. His numbers are actually down year over year, but just the speed with which he's making decisions, the speed on his cuts, the speed that he's slipping out of screens, he's like getting dribble penetration. Like, everyone's just making so much more deliberate movement in the half court. The way they get up the floor and they run into their horn sets, they're not just beating around the bush so they could get to a Donovan Mitchell ball screen. They're running action for the purpose of getting shots early in the clock, whether it's like, if we're running this horn set and the dude's open on the back screen, throw it. If the skip pass is open, throw it. If you have an opportunity to drive a closeout, drive it. And then that's where the Evan Mobley part, and obviously everyone's playing better. We were talking about Garland earlier, and we'll get to him in a second. But like, the Evan Mobley on ball stuff to me is just another way for them to get that initial advantage so they can go bang, bang, shot. Like get that initial drive, the closeout, kick, easy catch and shoot three on the side. And it's like they're doing a lot of this, like spamming Merrill, setting screens for Mobley right around the elbow, and then just quick slipping out to the wing. And almost every time, either Mobley's getting downhill and drawing multiple defenders for kickouts, or Merrill's open on the slip, and then it's hit shot for him, or quick swing pass to the corner, or swing to the corner, drive the baseline. There's another shot available. Like, they're just getting the defense in rotation with these simple actions at the beginning of possessions. Everyone is moving quickly. Everyone is decisive, and it's paying off. And that's the thing, is like, one of the biggest things that stood out to me is like, it feels like Donovan Mitchell has been able to be more picky about when he has to really grab the reins on offense. Because that was one of the big things that stood out to me last year with the Cavs, is it just felt like at times Donovan would read the room and be like, we don't have the juice right now. I got to just spam pick and roll and take my step back threes and my little Euro step floaters and all that kind of stuff. And like now it just feels like there's so much more variety that he can be picky, which is leading to an increase in his efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, so on the Donovan front, really starting, in my opinion, starting from February last year, because Darius had such a what I would call basically a lost season, where he just was not himself due to injury, due to personal, whatever it might have been. He just wasn't himself. Donovan basically played point guard. They basically played Luka Doncic ball with Donovan in that role through the playoffs. And Donovan really helped keep the offense afloat, but I always felt like that was a high floor, low ceiling outcome for this team's offense. And, if you're going to play that kind of style, because that was, a lot of the discussion this offseason where, big contingencies of the fan base were like, oh, we got to trade Darius. We got to let Donovan run the offense. And I was like, well, if we are going to just keep Donovan at point guard, then yeah, we probably should, because Darius is underqualified to be an off-ball shooting guard, and and really needs to. If you're gonna have a guy like that, he needs to play point guard, and it really bears out in the touches. Important to note, huge minutes played disclaimer here, because no one in the Cavs is averaging 30 minutes a game right now. But last year, Donovan was averaging around 79 touches a game. Darius averaged 75, and Evan averaged 51. This year, Darius is leading the team at 59.4 touches a game. Evan is second on the team in 57.4, and Donovan is at 55.1. Like I mean, if you would have told me in March of last year that Donovan would be third on the team in touches per game year over year, I would have fallen out of my chair.
That's a crazy stat.
I mean, this is a team where, every single action was being initiated by the guards, generally without an advantage. A lot of just high pick and roll, and then let's see what we can do. To a team that's their offense is just frankly much more democratized. There are a lot of guys starting plays. They had a play last night against the Bulls where Jared Allen gets the ball and takes it up court, takes it at the top of the arc, runs a handoff for Sam Merrill with Donovan just getting a flare screen on the weak side. Like Donovan is like a secondary action. He's a decoy action almost for this team. So I think when you don't have a Luka or a Jokic level, like ultra super duper star talent, you need to democratize your offense. You need to have the defense kind of not know where they need to be set up on a possession to possession basis. And to your point, a lot of ways they're doing that is just letting guys like Evan just get the board and run. They're not feeling the need to have Darius and Donovan walk the ball up court and initiate every set, and it's just made them really hard to guard.
Dude, you're preaching right now. I would even argue that for the top tier guys, you need to democratize your offense. But I mean,
I would, but you can get away with it easier when you
can Jokic. Make it further before it eventually crumbles. That's the crazy part to me. Like when I think back, I would say the closest person to being able to actually do Luka Doncic ball successfully to the latest levels was LeBron, just because he had that incredible amount of stamina. But even then, it was like I remember on the 2016 Cavs, I used to be like, why is Kyrie having these possessions where he dribbles the ball up the floor like 13 times and dribbles the clock out and takes a contested mid-range jump shot, and literally there's not a single pass on the entire possession? Like, remember those possessions with the Cavs? And
oh yeah, those were the LeBron break
exactly
possessions.
And then it dawned on me, I'm like, LeBron's standing 27 feet from the rim just over on the wing with his hands on his hips. Breathing. Yeah, and I was like it's so fascinating to me, because you absolutely have to have variety. I mean, even going back to Jokic, who was like the last super duper star to really get it done. With Jokic, it was like, oh, it's game one of the finals and Aaron Gordon has the matchup. Let's just throw the ball to Aaron Gordon 6 straight times on Gabe Vincent to start the game, and we're going to build an initial lead, right? It's like, that's the thing, is like, you never know how the matchups are going to work as you go from team to team. I look at this particular team, for example. Like, you've got Donovan Mitchell, right, and Darius Garland. There are these speed guards that rely on pull-up shooting, getting dribble penetration and ball screens and being able to spray out from there. When you play that style, inevitably you might run into a team that's got a couple of really, really damn good guards that can guard the ball and that can stay attached on screens. And all of a sudden it turns into a different type of game. And all of a sudden having a guy like Mobley who can initiate offense, at least to get the defense in rotation so that then Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are attacking closeouts, then you can use their advantages without having to have that great guard defender pressuring the hell out of them.
Yeah, or just get the ball with advantage. You know, like I've talked about that a lot of, my biggest gripe with how the offense I felt like kind of collapsed down the end of last year was that Darius was just having to start a play from scratch. And Darius is not a big guy. He is not a strong guy. He is not an explosive guy. That is not, none of those things are playing to his strengths. So like, yeah, he can run a cold high pick and roll and get you a pretty solid possession out of it. But if he catches it coming off a pin down where the defender is worried about him shooting because he caught the ball with 2-3 feet of space before he even goes into that secondary pick and roll, or a dribble handoff where he's getting the ball with the running start. Now, the things he is great at, which is the change of direction, the tempo kind of push pull, where he goes from 0 to max speed back to 0 better than almost anyone. Like all the stuff he is great at, now he gets to actually leverage with a defense that's already trying to catch up. Like, and that is the stuff that they're able to do right now. I mean, obviously the Evan stuff, and Evan has always been kind of the thing that enables that, because he is an elite playmaker as a big in terms of his feel for the game, in terms of his ability to pass. And the skill stuff has been catching up. The handle's getting a little tighter every year. The touch is getting a little better every year. But his ability to read and kind of interpret what's going on, that's always been there. And I feel like they're really leaning much harder into
the 3-point shooting piece is important too, because it's helping him get dribble penetration. I thought like Zach LaVine went on a little run last night. As I was watching him, I was like, man, if he didn't make like $100 million, and if I could trust his body to hold up, I think he'd be such an interesting trade target, because like he
had a couple nasty plays.
Yes, he did. When I was watching, I was like, man, he's still got that little left shoulder fade he hit to tie the game. What was it, at like 106 or something like that? I was like, man, like he's got it. It's just,
dude, the play where he is streaking down the floor, he gets bumped on an outlet pass, and he like high points the ball, taps it to himself, and then gets hit again and hits the reverse layup and one. I'm like, my God,
complete apex athlete. I know. But like during that run, like Darius Garland had 2 huge plays. One, the ball screen where the defender was like shading heavily on his right side, and he ended up, I think it was LaVine, and he ended up getting downhill and throwing that beautiful lob to Evan Mobley. And then the second one was just a dribble penetration off the top of the key, and he got a little left-handed layup. And it's like he's getting downhill because of the threat of the 3-point shot. Like that is a key element to it. If you can get baked in dribble penetration without having to leverage your athletic tools simply because of the threat of your shot, that is where you can bring real value. And again, that's the other matchup piece where it's like he had the most favorable matchup in that situation. Like it's a lot easier for him to go to work against Zach LaVine than it is for Donovan Mitchell to go against Aya Dosunmu, whoever it is that's on him in any given situation where he's drawing the high leverage perimeter defender. And that's where that variety comes in. That is where that like you just have more punches you can go to depending on the matchup. The Emirates NBA Cup is here, and you can win big getting in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All 30 teams split into 6 groups every Tuesday and Friday, playing for the right to advance in the single elimination in-season tourney, culminating in the NBA Cup Championship in Vegas. Get behind your favorite players and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the best place to bet NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. The current favorite to win the NBA Cup is Boston at plus 425, with the Cleveland Cavaliers in second place at plus 850. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's code HOOPS, HOOPS, for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. The depth I did not even notice in my research that there's not a single Cav playing over 30 minutes. Tell us a little bit.
That might have changed last night, but it's close.
Tell me a little bit about the bench and the specific guys that have been popping to you. That third quarter run from Ty Jerome last night, his activity on the ball and his ability to get deflections and get them out in transition. And he's kind of a sneaky little bucket getter too. So tell us a little bit about the bench.
So before I start about the bench, I did want to hit on the fact that Kenny is just running really great rotations. And it was really interesting because, obviously being so team focused as I am, you kind of forget how other coaches coach, if that makes sense. Like, because, we just had JB for 5 years, and Bickerstaff is a guy who really prefers to run a tighter rotation. He really, you can tell JB is at his happiest when he's playing 8. And every now and again would extend to 9. But there were, the 5 minutes last year where the team was fully healthy. He tried a 10-man rotation, and it just felt like, you're ever at a buddy's house and you borrow like a hoodie or something because it's cold, and you're like, this isn't quite
this doesn't fit.
This isn't quite comfortable, Like, that's the way it felt with JB. It felt like he was trying another coach's tactics when he had to go 10. And then you watch what Kenny's doing, playing 10, and he said before the season he might try play an 11 when the team's fully healthy. And like, you can really see why it, for someone who was like, I was like, dude, they have 4 guys that need at least 32, 34 minutes a game. That gets really hard, really fast. You just run out of minutes, and you're playing guys 2-minute shifts. He completely has changed my mind on this because of his blend of orthodoxy of like, guys know when they're getting their run. They know when they're getting subbed out. And as a result, they're able to play very contained and, really put all their energy towards their run. At the 7-minute mark of every first quarter, Sam Merrill and George Niang come in. And normally by the 2-minute mark, they're out. So those guys know this is the way I need to run and how I'm going to play during this stretch. There's no ambiguity to it. But in the second half, he kind of is able to read the room a little bit more. He's a lot more flexible and a little less orthodox. So, hey, our starters look like they're dead. We've played the heaviest schedule of the entire league so far. We're just going to go with a 5-man bench lineup. So he's doing a really nice job of creating a structure where guys know where their minutes are coming from and giving himself the flexibility. So I feel like that is part one to this, is the bench is playing better because everyone knows exactly what their job is and when their job needs to be executed. And then obviously the players are just playing great. Sam Merrill, has been a real tool, as you mentioned, alongside Evan Mobley and dude, Ty Jerome.
He's hooping, man.
Ty Jerome, he has been the best backup point guard in the league. I actually did a little dig right before this, and it's pretty objectively true. Maybe TJ McConnell can lay claim. Ty Jerome is averaging 22 points, 7.6 assists, 4.5 boards, 3.3 steals per 36 on 61, 54, 83% splits.
Outrageous.
He is he was a guy I was really excited about them adding last year. He only plays 2 games. He has just a freak season-ending ankle sprain that just never gets better. It's a high ankle sprain at the beginning of the year. You go, oh, he might miss a month or month and a half, and then he'll be back. And he never got better. He ended up having to get surgery. It was a crazy thing. And, so he was a guy who was either out of sight, out of mind for the Cavs or for Cavs fans. Not this Cavs fan, but for the general population, or was a guy that was kind of representative of frustration with oh, this guy that we added didn't even play. You got a ankle sprain, didn't even
Gabe Vincent for the Lakers is what you're saying.
Absolutely, that's a great comp. Where it's not fair to the guy, but certain parts of the fan base just kind of treated him as part of their frustration, and he has he's taken his game up another level in the system. Remember, he played for Kenny in Golden State.
Yep.
When he was kind of the second/third point guard, depending on what part of the season you were in.
He had real moments there too. Hmm.
Absolutely. He had real moments against the Cavs. I think that's part of the reason they signed him. He scored like 27 in a bench mob win in Cleveland. But he's got great size. He's 6'5". He's got a great stop and start game. The playmaking's been really good. And here's the thing, man. Like, this team is not an inherently nasty team. Evan and Jarrett, they are so fundamental, so smart, but they aren't the kind of guys who are like digging elbows into people's sides. Neither is Darius, neither is Donovan. I would say we are the least grifty team in the league on that front. Like, and the free throw rates will confirm that. So it's nice having a guy who kind of plays like a dick. Like, I mean, I think there's no other way to say it than a guy like Jerome is kind of doing the stop start, clearing space with his elbows. And, he just plays different than all their other players. And so he has been unbelievable. I thought he was one of the guys that was primed or, most dangerous to lose his rotation spot when Max Strus returned. Because, by the way, Max Strus.
Yeah, what about Max Strus?
Yet.
Exactly.
Our starting small forward, who was our best plus minus player.
Do you think he'll start when he comes back?
Okay. I think so. Yeah. I think so. I would be really, really surprised if he doesn't. And I think that we, to do a quick detour, I think we've just now started to see them really start missing him. That Brooklyn game where they're having to, the bigs are not able to make an impact. Brooklyn's playing super tough at the point of attack. We're playing Karis LeVert at power forward, and they won the game with that lineup, but it was dodgy a few times on the glass and things like that. And they, that would be Max Strus playing those power.
And he can shoot on the
minutes.
move. He can shoot on the move too, which is they're like he's kind of like what Merrill does, but for the starters. Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of is an amalgamation of what Dean, Wade, Isaac Okoro, and Karis LeVert provide all individually. He kind of does all those things at like a B to B plus level. And I just think he's better than all those guys. If I'm being really like just a little reductive, he's just the best role player on the team in terms of what he actually brings to the court. So, they haven't had him. I thought Ty Jerome would be, a guy that maybe might drop out of the rotation. I don't think you can. He's been that good, that consistent, and he's saved them a few times.
And more often than not, you just have too many opportunities in the regular season to give guys minutes. It's like the 13-man rotation in Golden State, which, by the way, I think this is where Kenny gets that idea from, which is basically like, we're going to run like crazy. We're going to play super hard. We're going to play with a ton of pace in the half court. Everyone's minutes are going to be down, but we're going to do these like just aggressively long rotations. But to your point, consistent, so the guys know what they can count on and they're not scared of getting pulled anytime they make a mistake. But like I think that that goes hand in hand with the scrappiness, that goes hand in hand with the forcing of turnovers. By the way, you mentioned the huge offensive rebound on Twitter this morning, the one where Ty got the rebound, missed the three, got another rebound, and then it ended up, I think, with Karis LeVert hitting a three at the top of the key. He had another huge play down the stretch right before they took him out, right before they went to the closers, where it was 108, 106, I think. And then he just picks Zach LaVine clean at half court and they go the other way.
Dude, he's had a lot of those, bro. He's had a ton of those kind of plays. It's been bananas. He is averaging 3.3 steals per 36 right now. His previous career high and like almost no minutes in Phoenix was 1.6. I mean, he is, I mean, and these are consistent rips where he is like, he's kind of doing the sprint at the ball handler as they take it up half court and just, pick six them. Like, these are not like low impact. Oh, the guy just happened to throw me the ball steals. These are, I'm ripping the ball away from you steals. And like, that's generally been a big emphasis from Kenny going into preseason, where he's like, hey, we've got this great defensive team. We're not a great turnover forcing team. Plays like that, where they're really emphasizing ripping the ball. Even guys like Niang have gotten their hands on balls a lot more in terms of getting rips and steals. Like, those kind of plays are part of what has made this team feel a little bit inevitable over the last couple weeks, where it's like, man, every time the other team's making a real push, someone like Ty Jerome just rips them and it generates a wide open three. And it's like, that's so painful for the opposition. And
just makes a play. Exactly. They're forcing 17 turnovers per game, which is third in the NBA. Last year, they were 18th. And the other big thing I've noticed and this I think also came from Golden State. It's like that textbook, like not conceding switches just for the sake of conceding switches, but being more willing to switch and then like stunting and recovering rather than hard helping and doubling, which has caused defenders to be positioned in passing lanes more often and has caused offensive players that have the ball to be more indecisive. So then when they turn to make those kick out passes, there's people in the lanes and they're using that to then just further leverage their transition pushes. Like, I mean, the game against the Lakers, man, I think the Lakers had 6 turnovers.
That was a beating.
Yeah, it was a complete beating. They had, I think, 6 turnovers in the first quarter, and I'm pretty sure they scored on every single one of them. I think they hit 5 threes in the lane. They did like 17 points on 6 turnovers in one quarter.
Yeah, I mean, and what's funny, the defense is actually underperforming what I think they should be doing. I want to say I didn't update the stat after the Bulls game, but they're 25th in opposing 3-point percentage. Like teams are hitting at a very, very high rate. They had 2 games in a row where AJ Green and Jose Alvarado combined to go like 14 of 15 from 3 against them. Like, they've had guys go just bananas against them from 3, despite. So, like, I think they're 9th in defensive rating. That might have changed after last night. But, like, they are generally underperforming their metrics. But to your point, I think their fundamentals are really, really strong. When they're switching, especially when they switch a big at the point of attack, I really would recommend anyone watching the team to not look at the ball on those plays and look at the tag out that happens on the back end where, Darius Garland, they'll run the opposing team will run a pick and roll at Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. Evan will take the switch. Darius will switch on to the opposing team's power forward. In no time at all, Jared Allen will have swapped in, tagged Darius to a lower threat player. And that was a team, I've always credited the Boston Celtics for this. They're the best tag out team in the league and have been for like 6 years. The Cavs are starting to learn how to do that at a much better rate. And then frankly, dude, they're just playing better at the point of attack. Darius Garland, when he gets switched onto an apex scorer, isn't getting cooked. Sam Merrill is holding his ground. He's not killing it, but when you have Evan or Jared on the back line, your margin for error as a defender is pretty high. You just can't get absolutely torched. So even if you get beaten, but like make it a little harder for them, you're still probably going to give up a less than ideal shot for the offense. So like, again, their margin for error is great. Their attention to detail at the point of attack is great. Steph No on Twitter just this morning posted a clip of Donovan denying Zach LaVine down the stretch where he had scored 3 or 4 possessions in a row. And basically Donnie face guards him for an entire possession to keep him away from the ball. Like they have the top end talent on the back line, and then they just have the attention to detail at the point of attack. And it's, and again, I think this is the 9th overall team in defense right now. I really think they'll end the season around, in the top 5. So even if their offense drops off a little, they have margin for error on the other end.
Yeah, it goes back to the thing I said at the beginning of the show, which is like once you start to win to a certain degree, it becomes infectious, and then you actually start to, it's kind of like I was talking about with Georges Niang, like guys even that haven't been great defenders in the past are just more locked in because it's like, hey, we're doing this together, guys. Like we're all in this together. There's like almost like a community feel from the defensive end. And like I think this is one of the coolest things that happens in sports when you kind of catch this like flash in a pan winning type of environment, because you can literally see it build on itself. You can literally see it gain momentum. But we have to go negative now, Carter. So if I asked you to nitpick this team and to come up with a reason why I'm not even saying a reason why they would fail. Just say what you are concerned about. Is there anything that when you watch them, when things do go off the rails, when teams do go on a run, like, oh, Chicago's up 7 in the third quarter, what's happening? What are the things that you're seeing if you had to nitpick this team?
Well, there really hasn't been much. These will be the definition of nitpicks. I've noticed that there are some possessions. I think in the last 2 games we've seen it more than any other, where there's been a little bit of a backslide where they're doing the swing into a swing into a swing, and then all of a sudden Donovan has to shoot a grenade because there's 2 seconds left. There's been a little bit of a backslide there, or Darius doesn't take the open 3 when the defender goes under. So those are some of the habit things. I think in terms of the comfort level. Um, you know, we talked about this earlier in the pod, but I think Donovan Mitchell has had the biggest degree of an adjustment to make of anyone on the team. Um, and I think there are a few possessions this year where, if you're really watching closely, where he is breaking the offense to just go get a bucket. And he's amazing at that, but it is noteworthy that I feel like Donovan is still finding himself in the Kenny offense more than anyone else, which is funny because all of his efficiency numbers are high, but you can still see a few cracks where it's like, all right, Donovan, you can't hijack that possession. Everything's running super smooth. But to his credit, again, I know this is the nitpicking section, but even when he does that, he hasn't been stubborn. The Nets game down the stretch, that game is tight. They're in the middle of a huge comeback. Being spurred by Darius, being spurred by Evan, and Donovan comes down, basically doesn't pass an entire possession, takes a contested 17-footer and misses. Every Cavs fan in our Discord is furious at the shot. And then the next four possessions, it goes, Darius, you go run. You're cooking right now. So, I think he is still kind of figuring out where he is supposed to press and push. They needed him to do that last night against the Bulls with heavy legs. And, he ends up scoring, I think it was 36. There have been games where he has needed to let Darius kind of run the offense down the stretch. So that's one little thing. I think generally the 3-point percentage is just too high. They're not all going to keep shooting this well. Karras is well over 40%. Karras LeVert is at 47% from three this season. I don't.
There are a lot of guys around the entire league that are shooting outrageously good. It's kind of a weird start to the year. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been. I don't know if it's just fresh legs. Defenses are a little behind, but Donovan's at 41, Darius is at 46, Karras is at 47, Isaac Okoro is at 48, Ty Jerome is at 54. These things are great and fun, but you do expect some drop off. So I think those are the things that I'm kind of keeping my eye on, and I'm just going to keeping my eye on the clutch stuff. Are they going to start slowing down again when their legs are tired later in the year, reverting to those bad habits? Or are they going to continually run offense, get good looks, which they have been through this stretch? I think those are the big things. There's some nits to pick on the back line. If Niang is, they don't have a lot of big man depth. It's funny because everyone talks about them as this big team, but they really only have two centers on the roster, and one of them starts for them at power forward. Because Tristan Thompson is much more of a veteran leader than a guy that you really want to be playing 20 minutes a game. What happens to this team if Evan Mobley misses 3 weeks due to injury, or Jared Allen is having a series where he just can't hang for whatever, he's having a bad series and you want him closer to 20 minutes a game, not 32, 34. That's the one roster piece where I go, this feels a little shallow. I feel pretty good about them at the guard. I feel pretty good about them at the wing, but the bigs, a guy that, my co-host Justin and I've talked about a lot is, man, how nice would a Larry Nance be on a team like this? A guy who can play a little 4-5, because they just don't have any 4-5s on the roster other than Evan. And ultimately you do want him playing a lot of minutes at the power forward, because that's a big part of your team's identity. So those are my nits to pick, but man, do they feel nitpicky?
I thought that was a quality nitpicking job from you, Carter, for an undefeated team. It's a hard job. I thought you did good. The Donovan Mitchell thing it's kind of delicate, because I have overwhelmingly been positive about it, because I've seen so many examples this year where he's willing to stand on the side and let somebody go to work, which has been a huge moment of growth for him. But at the same time, staying mobile and moving around and doing his job and doing something
he has not been bad. Yeah. He's been our best player. These are the nitpickiest things.
But yeah, even on the bad possessions too, I always have a little bit of grace for that sort of thing.
Yeah, how can you take that away
Yeah,
from
and
him?
like also there is something to be said about a scorer like wanting to feel the basketball a little bit. Like there it's
Yep.
like for instance, like I've always hated the right shoulder fade from LeBron in the post. Like I feel like he's never made it more than
Yep.
33% of the time. I feel like he settles for it way too often. But I have always just been okay with LeBron taking 3 or 4 kind of BS shots a game where he's just kind of feeling out his like kind of like creative shot making. You know what I mean? Because then again, I want him to feel a little bit more comfortable when if he does end up in a late clock situation at the end of a game and he needs to create a shot. So like there's always a delicate balance between letting a scorer feel the ball and like, okay, you're starting to co-opt too many possessions. We need to get back into our flow. And so it's always complicated, but I do think Donovan's done a good job. So for our last topic today, I'm just gonna I'm just going to take the devil's advocate stance. And I do kind of feel this way, but it's just way too early in the season. I just want to see a lot more basketball. But let's say I'm like, okay, I think Boston's way better than Cleveland, and here's why. I think that inevitably they can do their, killer whale hunt the matchup game and consistently get to situations where they can attack Garland in space to get the defense in rotation, pull Jared Allen and Evan Mobley further away from the rim. They have the ability on defense to do a lot more switching. They have connectivity there too. We know that they're going to do something like put Jayson Tatum on Jared Allen like they did last year, and probably put Porzingis on Evan Mobley and have him just sit around the basket. We know that there's like a formula here for Boston. Can you make a case for our viewers why you think Cleveland should be on Boston's tier? Or if you don't think that they should be, explain how close you think they are.
Okay, so I do think Boston is just far and away the best team in the league. I'm not, I don't got my blinders on that hard. You are giving me the opportunity to air a
Let's
grievance,
do
though.
it.
So that's fun, which is that I don't know why everyone's acting like the Indiana Pacers were the best challenge Boston got all last year when they swept them and we ran Boston off their home
Yeah,
floor.
in game two, right? Yeah.
I mean, absolutely destroyed them in that game, and then played the rest of the series less healthy than any Boston opponent. We had the best offense against Boston in the playoffs last year. We're the only team that consistently scored on them, even with no Donovan Mitchell for the back half of the series, even with no Jared Allen the entire series. Like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here, Like we didn't have Darius Garland in Game 5. We literally were running Karis LeVert. Oh, we didn't have Karis LeVert in Game 5. Like this team actually made Boston work really, really hard for that series win, despite being more depleted than just about anyone. I think that the two bigs is the ultimate kind of panacea for Boston ball, like as far as one it can be found, because the big thing about Boston is they get rim pressure, they suck you in, they kick it out for three. And the best way to do that is to not have to go two on the ball. And the Cavs do a great job between switching and tag outs, between just literally being able to cover ground where Evan can stunt in to stop rim pressure and get out and contest a
Don is
3-point
sneaky
shot.
great at
Jarrett
that
can
too.
do that. Yes. Jarrett can do that at a high level. I think Boston's has levers to pull. It's not like the Cavs don't have. I think Boston would absolutely be favored in a series because they can work to get switches where Darius or Donovan are guarding Jalen or Jayson. But like, if I'm any team in the league, I'd rather die to Tatum ISO mid-range pull-ups than to any other thing that Boston does. And I think the Cavs are best suited to bait Boston into their worst habits. And that might not get you through a series, but like compared to all these other teams like Boston can just take away the best stuff they do, I don't think that's the case for Cleveland. I think their size in the front court, they're actually the only team that's bigger whose size can really affect Boston in the front court because they don't just have the one big that they can throw Porzingis on. They've got Evan, and like Evan's going to make Jayson Tatum guard him. They can attack the offensive glass. They have tools in their toolkit, and frankly, as great as Drew Holiday and Derek White are at the point of attack, I gotta say, going from the Orlando series where they had Jalen Suggs, that insane bulldog, guarding them, Boston felt easier. They are easier to attack from the perimeter than a team like Orlando. And that's, Drew does his best against the bulky, strong guys, like the change, Donovan was able to get to the rim at will till he got hurt in that series. Darius wasn't, because Darius was like a shell of himself through the back half of the year. But I think that, it's actually not a bad matchup for them, even though you look at their offense comes from the two great guards. Boston has two great defenders. I think the things that make Derek White and Drew great, they're good defenders. They're 90th percentile defenders on Darius and Donovan, but they're not 100th percentile defenders. And I do think that matters in a series where the margins are as thin as they are in the playoffs.
Orlando is a defensive monster. I'm glad you brought that up. That is they're like they ran some of the ugliest offense in that series that I've ever seen. And there are times where I'm like, what are you guys doing? But their defense, there's no denying that they're physically imposing.
Suggs is the best. Suggs is the best guard defender.
100% agree with you.
And I think it's
100% agree with you. They've got size, strength. They're great at rebounding. They can switch. They do all this kind of stuff. The case you made against Boston, I think makes a lot of sense in the sense that Kenny Atkinson's kind of the perfect guy for the job in terms of switching, containing, scramming out of mismatches on the back end, and just basically trying to bait them into pull-up jump shots. And I do think Donovan Mitchell is capable of out-executing Jayson Tatum in a 7-game series in the clutch. But I think you're right. I think Boston would deserve to be favored. It's just that Cleveland is encroaching on that tier in a major way. Interestingly enough, I was pulling up, I had to read a DraftKings ad yesterday, and they had the Cavs as the second favorite to win the NBA Cup. So I was like, I want to dig into
Hell yeah, brother.
Hell yeah, man. So I wanted to...
Thanks, DraftKings.
So I wanted to look at the title odds, and they actually have them tied for 7th right now with the Suns. I'm surprised by that. So they have the Thunder and Celtics ahead of them, to be expected. The Knicks are ahead of them. The Nuggets are ahead of them. The Mavs ahead of them, and the Timberwolves. Here's the thing. I'm a huge Anthony Edwards fan. I don't know what you could have seen this year to make you think the Timberwolves are a bigger title threat than Cleveland compared to the way Cleveland's been playing.
Listen, man, I think ultimately here's what it comes down to. And I am low on my grievance quotient compared to the rest of the fan base on this, because the reality is they got embarrassed in a playoff series. And even though that was 2 years ago, even though they won a playoff series, they haven't had that no doubt ass kicking of a playoff series yet. Because Orlando, and again, I picked Cavs in 7 against Orlando because I think Orlando is awesome. But the reality is, if they had beaten Orlando in 5, I'll bet those odds are different. Mm-hmm. But we have not seen this Cavs team go up a level in the postseason yet. In fact, we've really only seen them especially on their offense. We've only seen their offense go down in the postseason. And I understand that, especially for a team that's not going to be a public team like the Cavs, we're not in a glamour market. You kind of have to go take it. You have to go take that perception win, So I think there will remain skepticism about the ceiling of this team until we see more consistent dominance, And this is what I was talking on our last podcast about this, where I feel like my expectations for this team in the most literal sense have not changed since the start, which is that I think that they really should be a top 2 or 3 seed in the East. And I think they should really try to make a push towards the conference finals. That would be a successful season for me. That's still the same, except how I think each series should go on the road to that outcome. That's where I've changed. Where it's instead of, if you pull Philly in the first round, if you lock up the 1 or the 2 seed and you pull Philly in the first round, maybe at the beginning of the year, I'd be just happy to win. Where I'm now, that's a wounded team, and I think they're a tier better than them. They need to win decisively. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they should kick butt. They should beat these, tier, if we're gonna pretend, if we're gonna say the Cavs are kind of in a tier of their own right now, at least in where the season is right now, they certainly are. Then they should be dominant of the teams in the tiers below them. If they get to a conference finals showdown with Boston, just hanging shouldn't be enough. You should make
Yeah.
them sweat.
Needs to be a 6 or 7
You should
game
really,
series. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, you need to have them really have to be great to beat you. Like that. So like it's even though the literal outcome isn't different, like I do think expectations have changed.
Yeah, it's fascinating because coming into the season, I had Boston, New York, Milwaukee, Philly as like this tier, and then I had Cleveland, Orlando, and Indiana as like this tier, and that's completely jumbled for me to start the year. Like to me, I think the Cavs are clearly better basketball teams than Philly and Milwaukee. Like I like you said, I think they're just on a completely different tier. The Knicks, I'm always like brand new basketball team, give them a lot of time. You know what I mean? Yeah,
they're weird. They're a weird team that has to figure out
exactly. So like who the heck knows what's going on with them in the long run? But I think there's like a legitimate case to like definitively say Cleveland's the second best team in the East behind Boston. And that just was not how I felt going into the season. And if anything, it almost feels like a different tier at this point. It feels like Boston and Cleveland, and then there's the rest of the East. And so, even though it's been somewhat of a small sample size, there's been enough big wins. I mean, I don't think the Lakers are as good as Golden State to start this year, but I think Golden State and LA are two pretty good teams that didn't just go into Cleveland and get beat. They went into Cleveland and got humiliated. Like that is like it's there's something special going on there. But Carter, I think you did an absolutely fabulous job of educating our listeners on what it's been like being on this ride to start this year. Before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody about the Chase Down Pod, where they can find it, and some of the stuff you and Justin have been working on?
Yeah, so pretty simple. Chase Down Pod on Twitter. We are we're on the Cavs YouTube channel. We go live about twice a week on there, and you can obviously find us on whatever your preferred podcast platform is. Yeah, we go twice a week during the season, do a lot of immediate post game reactions, which is really fun, and it's been a lot of fun so far this year.
That was awesome. Everybody head over to the Cavs YouTube channel and subscribe so you guys can watch the Chase Down podcast. That is all we have for today. We're going to be back tomorrow morning with just a couple game breakdowns from the Wednesday night slate, as well as another episode of Timpf's Tape. As always, we sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show, and we'll see you then.